Clay Travis, I've got a feeling in like 10 years' time, maybe sooner, we're going to look back on this period of the existence of planet Earth and think, what the hell were we doing? How was this insanity being allowed to happen? And it'll probably culminate in a 6'6" transgender athlete winning the 100 metres women's race at the Olympics by about 50 yards. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I give credit to Paula for speaking out and being willing to point out how ridiculous this is, because I do think it's going to take women athletes more so than people like you and me, Piers, who can look at this and talk about how ridiculous it is. But what we're starting to see is, in America at least, when Gallup polls this issue, increasingly massive majorities of the American population are saying this is wrong. And Piers, I don't even think you have to focus on sex itself. Obviously, men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women as a group. And by the way, that doesn't mean that some women aren't bigger, stronger, and faster than some men.
No,
which
but
is
it is
anecdotally
why, it is
how
just
people
on that
will
point.
respond.
It is why we separate the genders at the Olympics. I mean, if you made it gender, if you had what these,
there would never be.
If you had the woke dream of a gender-neutral Olympics, can you imagine how many actual women, biological females, would win a medal? I mean, literally, other than probably equestrian and shooting, maybe. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. There would be no women medalists. That's why the separation occurs. And by the way, Piers, what I focus on is I coach Little League sports. I've got 3 boys. If I showed up for 12-year-old soccer and I had a 16-year-old kid on my team, every parent would say, no, this is unacceptable. You can't do this. Can't do it for baseball, football, basketball. We have all sorts of changes to regulations. You can't be trans age, right? Like, I couldn't suddenly decide that I'm going to be a Little Leaguer. That's why they ask for birth certificates so you can go try to win the Little League World Series, because otherwise people would cheat, you know? And if I suddenly said, I'm coaching, I'm about to head, as soon as I finish this interview, Piers, I'm going to go to 7th grade basketball and watch my 13-year-old son participate. If suddenly one of the coaches came out on the court, 6'4", and said, hey, I'm trans age now. Right. Sure, I'm 33, but I feel 13. Everybody would think it was ridiculous. It's just the very essence of sport itself.
Yeah. Okay, Ava, I'm looking at you frowning away here. Explain to me why this isn't just insane. That Lia Thomas, who, as we've just heard, was not just the tallest boy in her college when she was competing as a biological male, but obviously the tallest girl as well. How can any of this be fair?
I think, OK, so this is a really interesting topic for someone who is gender critical, because on this show before, we have discussed puberty blockers and whether children should be allowed access to them when they are 12, 13 years of age. Now, boys develop when they are 12, 13. The second that they start to have testosterone, that is when they grow bigger, they have a larger muscle mass than women. If you don't want to see trans women competing in women's sports, then you're going to have to allow young children who do not feel, who are experiencing gender dysphoria, to have those drugs when they're younger.
No, not at all.
You are.
In my estimation, you do one of 2 things. It's very straightforward. This whole supposed insolvable problem is very straightforward. Trans women either compete against other trans women in an entirely new category, as there are more and more of them competing, or they compete against their biological sex, because that is the biology they've been born with. Tell me why that's not fair.
I don't think it's fair that people who've experienced gender dysphoria when they're growing up and don't feel that they are in the right body should not be allowed to compete in sports. And if you're going to take away their rights...
Why don't you care? Look, you go on about women's rights, and a lot of the time I agree with you. I want women to enjoy utter fairness and equality.
I think this is fair.
How can you possibly sign up to something that is so grotesquely unfair and unequal to women's rights?
Because Lia Thomas didn't wake up one morning and suddenly decide, I'm going to be able to win in the women's category, so I'm going to
That's exactly what she's doing.
That's not what happened.
That's what she's doing.
Lia Thomas, she is a woman, and so she is competing as a woman.
She's a trans woman.
She is a woman.
She's a trans woman.
We can go back and forth on
She's
this.
a trans woman born with a biological male body, which gives her an immediate, massive advantage over women who weren't.
So why aren't other members of her team happy that they're finally winning and qualifying for all of the things that they never qualified for
because
before?
They can all see that it's unfair.
Is it not a little bit of jealousy?
No, it's just they know that at some stage Lia Thomas is going to probably win the Olympic gold medal.
Oh no, that would be awful for America. Yeah, that would be terrible.
Here's why it's terrible. The United States women's soccer team, let's call it soccer for the benefit of this discussion, because they call themselves that, were #1 in the world. the best women's soccer players on the planet. And they got beaten, I think it was 8-1 by the Dallas under-15 boys team, right? That is the point, is that it wasn't that the women's team weren't great as a woman's team at soccer. It's that put them against a bunch of kids who are male, with male physiology, they got hammered.
Okay.
That's why we separate the sexes.
So what do we say about trans women then? Do we just say they're not allowed to play sport ever?
I just told you what we do.
No, because...
They compete against their biological sex, which is perfectly reasonable and fair.
That's not reasonable.
It's perfectly reasonable. By the way, solves the problem of the dressing room too, and who gets naked with who.
Let's talk about all of those teenage years where they would have been seeking medical treatment and they weren't allowed access to it. Now, that's happening in the UK, and it's happening very much so in the US. People are being denied medical treatment when they would like to have it.
All right.
Then when they get to of age, you don't let them play sports.
You and I are going to come back to this when someone like Lia Thomas wins an Olympic gold, depriving a woman of winning Olympic gold.
She is a woman.
And you're going to finally say, Piers, you were right all along.